Hello there, YouTube fam. I am so excited to be back again today with another interview series, Strengthened. Thank you so much to everyone for all your kind comments and positive feedback on how inspired you were by the guests we had on the Lockdown Lowdown series, the wisdom that they shared on the lessons they learned during the pandemic, and their life stories. We had incredible musicians, speakers, evangelists, artists, you name it. I, for one, walked away from that feeling strengthened, and that's exactly what I'd like to take into this interview series. So if you're not part of my YouTube family yet, you're very welcome to be. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And while you're at it, why not hit the bell sign too, so you can get regular notifications every time a new episode of Strengthened is out. Well, I am so honoured and delighted to have join us as our first guest today, the extraordinary Dr. Debbye Turner Bell. Beautiful inside and out, though her confidence, wisdom and charm certainly cause her to stand out, it's her love for God that truly shines through. Her crowning as Miss America 1919 helped act as a catalyst to her many remarkable roles. She is a veterinarian, journalist and news anchor, and has served as a staff correspondent for CBS for over a decade. But as though all that wasn't enough, she is also a corporate trainer, minister, motivational speaker, and beloved wife and mother. For some 20 plus years, she has addressed audiences in the corporate, academic, and community service arenas, and has spoken on topics such as being a woman in a man's world, effective communication, power of influence, and enhancing diversity in health professions. In addition to her speaking and media work, Debbye is the founder and CEO of Debbye Turner Bell Consulting, through which she provides leadership development training in communications, influence, and diversity to corporate and business leaders, managers, and executives world over. Here to share some invaluable wisdom, talk about some of the great lessons she's learned along the way, and one of her newest projects that I'm just so excited about, her book and memoir, Courageous Faith, a lifelong pursuit of faith over fear. The doc is in. Debbye, thank you so much for joining us today. It's such an honor to have you as our guest.
Oh, thank you so much, Beverly, for having me. I'm thrilled to be with you.
The intro to this video, our viewers have already heard about all the great things you have accomplished so far and all the plates that you have spinning, all those interesting roles. But I want to take it back to something that was quite the catalyst, if you will, for these roles, and that is Miss America 1990. And why I want to bring that up in particular is because firstly it's so cool, and especially if you're a fan of Miss Congeniality like I am, it's even more cool. But more so than that, looking in from the outside, that success looks so wonderful, but it wasn't overnight like many successes. In fact, it was 7 years in the making, and there were 7 years of trying and then trying again too. And what I love about yourself and people who are not afraid to strive for what they want to achieve is that success isn't something that necessarily comes easily, and successful people are not afraid to fail because they're not afraid to try. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh my goodness. Yes, so much to say. I will hop on the very last thing you said, that successful people are not afraid to fail. I believe that success is built on a foundation of failures because it requires trying, and not just falling down and trying again and falling down and trying again. It requires trying, learning from the mistakes, improving, and then trying again. And so you show me anyone that has achieved any measure of success, and I'll guarantee that they've had more failures than they've had successes. And as you mentioned in your intro, it took 7 years, 11 tries in 2 different states for me to win a state pageant that took me on to the Miss America pageant. And all along the way, I was told that I was never going to be Miss America. I wasn't the right type, that I, didn't have the background, didn't have the financial resources, didn't have the look. But along the way, I believed that God's will was in it for me. And I knew that if I didn't give up, that he would manifest his will and purposes in my life. In fact, at a prayer meeting, someone said to me, Debbie, if you don't give up, God will elevate you to the top. And so I clung to that. And I said, okay, God, I'm only doing this for your purpose. And so you show me what to do and how to do it. And I'll say yes to whatever you have. So it was being willing to fall down, dust myself off, and get back up, and not let naysayers or even circumstances discourage me, and understand that if I just keep trying, God's will is in this for me. He will bring this to pass. And that's so true, Beverly, just for life, because I don't know of anybody that's really successful that just does it on the first try. Even if they do it on the first try in one area, it's taken years and somewhere else that they've learned something that allows for that success. And so many people give up because they don't hit the goal the first time around, and they think, oh, it's just not for me, or it's too hard, and then they move on to something else, or just stop trying altogether. And I believe there are so many people that live below their God-given potential simply because they give up. And so I want to be amongst those voices that say, don't give up. Keep going, learn from your mistakes, and get back up. I believe that success is ahead of you if you do that.
Well, thank you so much, Debbie. We definitely need to hear that. And you mentioned your background as well there. And for those of you listening, in 2018, Debbie was actually inducted into the Hall of Fame in Mizzou, so the Mizzou Hall of Fame. And something that you said in your speech, and I'm going to leave a link in the video description below to that speech because you guys need to listen to it. And that really struck such a chord in my heart, was because it was just so real, firstly, and then at the same time it was just so sincere and yet humbling and inspiring. Was that you said something along the lines of the reason why you were standing there that day was because the leaders and faculties of the university, faculty members, were willing to bet on a little brown girl from Jonesboro, Arkansas, who grew up in a single parent home. And firstly I was like, don't cry. And secondly, what really hit me was like, I wonder whether by now, and I'm sure she has, Debbie has made the connection that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And centuries before Debbie graced the world with her presence, there was another, most likely brown girl, because of the heat in that part of the world, called Esther, who we read about in the Bible, who also came from a single parent household. In fact, she didn't have her biological parents with her anymore.
Right.
And people were willing to bet on her and believe in her, not just Mordecai, but also people in the king's palace. And it just got me thinking, I wonder how many Esthers and Daniels and Josephs there are in our generation who God bets on, because it doesn't matter where they're coming from or what they have financially or, you know, in the physical. It's what he's placed inside of them. So how important is it for us to believe in others, to spot that specialness God has given them, and really be nurturers of that, and not be so, you know, self-centered in our lives, but be investors into other people's lives.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up Esther. She's one of my favorite biblical characters. I always say that Esther is proof that God likes beauty pageants because she was the first pageant winner in history. But what's so amazing to me about Esther's story, and incidentally, I will be preaching on Esther in a couple of weeks. So I'm studying her and reading that book again after reading it countless times growing up. But to me, two of the most important aspects of the story of Esther, as you mentioned, Beverly, is first of all, God placed her at the right place at the right time for a divine purpose. And we must, first of all, realize, especially when we have faith in our Creator, that He wastes nothing. And so He will put us in strategic places for a purpose that's bigger than us. You know, if Esther had gotten into that position and thought, "Ooh, I'm queen, I'm living the big life, you know, the good life, you know, great for me, and y'all get along the best you can," it could have changed the course of history. Certainly would have changed our spiritual heritage as Christians. But she understood that there was a purpose for her, even beyond her circumstances, which were pretty good. And she was willing to take a step of faith over fear in order to walk into that purpose. So that's the first thing I always love to point out about the story of Esther, who became queen, who was this little orphan girl, this little orphan Jewish girl, which was an oppressed group at the time in Persia. But it was her uncle that really is the linchpin in that story, because not only was Esther placed in the right place at the right time, but she had that supporter, Mordecai, her uncle, who gave her sound advice. And she had enough sense to take his advice when he said, "Don't reveal your identity yet." And later she would, but at that point it was important for her not to. But Mordecai positioned himself to be used by God, and to see that Esther's position as queen was strategically important for his people. So all of that to say, don't get me preaching a sermon about it yet, but all about that to say, I believe that each of us have a purpose, and it is strategic divinely. And so it's not just about pursuing, in my context, the American dream, which is having the great job, the house, the car, the dog, the 2.5 kids, you know, and having what makes my life, it makes me happy. I believe that, you know, we should be happy, but we should also be seeking to fulfill our divinely given purpose in life. And we are all placed strategically in places in order to fulfill that purpose.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, preach it, because you're doing a great job. And you couldn't be more right, because, you know, it's so important. Yes, we live for that purpose, and often that purpose is sowing into somebody else's life, and
Yes.
so many people along the way. It might not just be that one particular person, but that small seed that you might sow that particular day, that word of encouragement someone needs to hear, which is being there for a friend. So absolutely, you spoke about somebody who gave Esther great advice, and one person that I imagine gave you great advice was your mother, because I have heard of what a remarkable lady she was. And what you also say is that she was someone who backed you up in prayer. And I think this is something that I can totally relate to, just the power of a praying mum and how far that can go. And especially now in your life, as you're a mum, your daughter Lindley, I believe she's going into 12, 13 now.
She's 12 years old, yes.
12, so she'll be hitting those teen years soon.
Yes, yes.
You've thought about. And you can probably relate to this in a totally different way now. Why is it so important for the mums out there to be praying?
Well, let me just say it very plainly, Beverly. I am living off of the prayers of my mother. I make no bones about that. She went on to be with the Lord, oh my goodness, 26 years ago, 27 years ago. So it's been a long time since she's been on earth physically here with me, but she left a legacy of prayer for my sister and for me. And I'm so appreciative for that. I remember hearing my mother. She was a prayer warrior, an intercessor, and she would pray into the wee hours of the morning, and sometimes pray all night. And I can remember as a little girl waking up to the sound of my mother in her room or out in the living room crying out to God. She was not a quiet prayer. She prayed with all her might, and sometimes it would annoy me because it would wake me up, and I'm like, oh, I just want to get my sleep. But as I got older, I began to appreciate, first of all, the power of prayer, and the privilege that I had being raised by a praying mother, because she believed the Bible when the Bible says that we can pray anything in the name of Jesus, and God will give us the desires of our heart. And there's a whole nother sermon about that. He will literally plant within our hearts the desires that he has for us, so that when we pray in accordance to what he has placed in our heart, we're praying in accordance to his will. And I learned that from my mom, and I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. My default reaction to adversity or challenge in life is to pray. I love to ask for advice. I love to read. I like talk shows, but those are not the places I go first. I go first to God, because I know there's power in prayer. And I learned that from that praying mother of mine. And I'm trying to live that out before my daughter, so that when she gets out on her own and she has to face challenge and struggle as a young woman, that she'll know from experience the power of prayer. That's my prayer as a mother, is not that my daughter will follow Jesus because she was raised in a home and taught to do that, but that she will because she's experienced him herself. And that was what my mother passed on to me. Was she passed on the opportunity to experience God and know truly who he is. And so my faith is mine, not because of my mother's faith, but because she made space for me to experience God individually. And I hope that I'm providing that same for my daughter.
Beautiful. What a great legacy throughout the generations. And he is a faithful God, and I believe there is something about him being faithful throughout the generations. It's those prayer warriors whose shoulders that we stand on. So thank God for that. And speaking of that, you've been one to always be quite outspoken about your faith, which is awesome, even back to the time of Miss America. And just tell us a little bit more about how that has helped you navigate through life, because you've been in different places, so different career paths as well, kind of blending into each other, CBS, and being a vet as well. So how has that helped you navigate through different situations that you found yourself in?
It's been the absolute essential, really, throughout my whole life. As you mentioned, my life had gone through many different seasons. I'm a veterinarian by education, but I don't practice. I worked in broadcast television news for 25 years. I'm now in full-time ministry. I'm on staff at a church. I'm the leadership and discipleship pastor. I do consulting and speaking, and I've had the blessing and opportunity to do a large number of a great variety of things. But every step of the way, I've been intentional about acknowledging God. And so I never intended to go into television, but I believe God opened that door for his purpose. And so the role that prayer plays for me is I acknowledge the Lord in all my ways. That's what the scripture says in Proverbs, right? And he will direct your path. Lean not to your own understanding, and he will direct your path. And so every decision I make, especially about life directions, I bathe it in prayer. God, what's your will? Because God sees the whole arc of my life. He knew the end of my life before the beginning of it started. In Psalms 139, where David says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and marvelous are your works, that my soul knows very well. Well, it goes on to say, he goes, and all the days were fashioned for me when as yet there was none. And that's a very flowery, poetic way of saying God has a life plan for us before our life ever begins. And so why would I ever direct my own footsteps when the creator of the universe, the one who loves me like a daddy, already has a plan and a purpose for me? So I then approach every career opportunity, every life change. Before I got married, it was all bathed in prayer, and not just saying, God, this is what I want to do, bless it. But it's, God, what is your will for my life? Reveal it to me. And then listening for the answer. Even right now, my family, we have to unexpectedly move. We didn't expect to have to move. And so even in this process of looking for a new home, my first prayer was, God, I didn't know this was coming, but you did. And so I believe you made provision for me. So my prayer is that you lead me to the provision that you already have for us. And so as we look, that's all I'm asking. I mean, I do have some things that I like in a house, but I really just want the home for my family that God has already provided. And so the prayer is, reveal it to us, lead us to it, or lead it to me. However you want to do it, God, I want your will. Because I know when I'm in the will of God and when you're in the will of God, that's where his provision is, that's where his protection is, that's where safety is, and that's where blessings are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. That's powerful. Thank you, Debbie. So you mentioned careers there, and I just want to drift a little bit because you're the first vet that we've had on my channel, and I was wondering, what is the most uncommon animal you've ever had the opportunity to treat?
Ooh, okay. I like that question. Well, at the veterinary school, we often would take cases from the St. Louis Zoo, which was a couple of hours away from the veterinary school if they couldn't handle it there. So I've been able to help with treating an elephant. I had a case when I was in veterinary school of a mountain lion, and some people call them cougars, that had a broken leg. It was somebody's pet, believe it or not, and the mountain lion jumped off their roof and broke his leg. And so that was my case when I was in the emergency department at the veterinary school. So those would be two of the probably more unusual animals. I've treated snake before, I've treated birds. You know, in veterinary school, we have to learn how to treat all the 6 domesticated animals, which are cats, dogs, cows, horses, pigs, chicken, but also had the opportunity to do some exotic medicine, like with the elephant and the mountain lion.
And with the elephant, because I'm imagining, like, where was the part that you had to like treat? Did you need a ladder or like?
Well, this was not a fully grown elephant, and it wasn't a male, if I can remember correctly. But we did have to have a step ladder. We did have to have a step stool to step on. And what I most remember is learning how to take blood from the elephant, because they've got huge blood vessels. Yeah, so that was probably the easiest time I ever had trying to draw blood from an animal, because their blood vessels are like as big as pipes. Yeah.
So cool. Thanks for sharing that story with us. And just lastly then, Debbie, something that I'm really excited about is your book, Courageous Faith. A lifelong pursuit of faith over fear. I'm so excited to read it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, simply because it's a busy time. I've got an exam coming around very soon, and as soon as I finish work, I'm checking into those books. But as soon as I get some breathing space, which I will, some downtime, I am so reading that. It's bumped its way up to the number 1 on my reading list. So
oh, good.
To read it. So for those of us who haven't had the chance to read it yet, tell us more about what it's about, really, and why we should read it.
Thank you so much for asking. As you said, it's called Courageous Faith. I like to call it a memoir with a faith message. And so I don't tell my whole story. It's not like an autobiography. I was born on this date and went to school here, blah, blah, blah. But it is meant to be inspirational and motivational. So it's built around 10 motivational principles that I believe are key to achieving success in life. And then I tell stories and vignettes of my own life and experience that demonstrate those motivational principles. So I start off with failure. And the book opens with the time that was most devastating when I lost the Miss Arkansas pageant for the third time. And I tell that story. And then it goes on, and the book talks about faith and determination and excellence and authenticity and patience and perseverance and overcoming and purpose. And so in each of those chapters, I tell a lot of my own life story. And I we started our conversation off, Beverly, with you making a comment that a lot of people see someone who's successful and they don't see the heartache and the sacrifice and the difficult times and the setbacks that it took to see that successful person. And so I kind of pull the curtain back and I talk about those hard times, my own issues with body image and fight with weight and, what it was like to compete as a woman of color, as an African-American in a pageant that historically had been exclusively white, and talked about waiting until I was 42 years old to finally get married and how difficult that was. And then trusting God to be able to have a child because I got married at 42 and, miscarried a couple of times. So I probably overshare, but it's all real life. And I write it because I know we're all experiencing real life. And sometimes we get discouraged because we think we're the only one that's going through it, that we're the only one that feels this way. And sometimes just knowing somebody else experienced it and triumphed over it, conquered it, then hopefully that's encouraging. Oh, well, if she can do it, then so can I. So I share the disappointments and the hard times, probably more than even the victorious times, because I want people to be encouraged to persevere, seek God's purpose, because I believe we were all created by a great God to achieve great purpose in this life. And so I hope that the book will be a blessing to you and all those who read it.
I'm sure it will be. And guys, you must read it. Check it out. I will leave a link in the video description below from where you can get your copy. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for joining us today. I will leave a link to all of Debbie's socials, so make sure you go follow her and support all the great stuff that she's doing. And Debbie, I will be praying that you find that perfect place that he's already got set for you, because he has that for you and your family. And just keep shining that tenacious light in our world. We need you to keep doing that, because it makes such a difference. And God bless you abundantly, more than you could ask or imagine, and your beautiful family too.
No, Beverly, thank you so much, and blessings to you. Thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation with you.
Likewise.